Ooh. Ooh. Welcome back to another episode of the Strongman Winner Circle podcast. This is episode 23 with my co-host Anthony Fuhrman. And before we get started, I want to thank you to all the listeners. We have 1,000 downloads between Spotify and Apple Podcasts in the short time that we've been on there. So I want to say thank you for everybody that has been listening. But Anthony,
it's really good to know that there's a bunch of nerds like us out there that love this kind of stuff.
So Anthony, so far that we've listened, of course, since we had it on Apple Podcasts, had it on Spotify, who do you think is the most popular podcast that we've had so far on there?
I would say it's probably one of the more recent ones, I would assume. McKeegan was a really good one.
What's your guess?
I would say either McKeegan, maybe even Tommy. Yeah.
That's your guess. So the guess is Jesse Nelson. So
Big Country Jesse. The one I'm not in.
So the one with on YouTube, do you know who still is the reigning champ on YouTube? Terry Rady of Peerless Performance Systems.
Hey, if you get your eyes on, you never know what's going to happen. So it's good for you.
So Anthony, what are we talking about today?
I think, one, I was talking about this amazing bottle of Zone smelling salts. I was going to crack open and just kind of get a look and see and smell all the beautiful things. Whew. I'm ready to lift.
How was that?
I'm ready to PR with Zone smelling salts. But no, really. So hold on, let me gather myself.
Before we get into it, before we started, I sniffed the red ammonia beginner's version, and that gave me a pretty good head rush. But Zone has plenty of different products. I think Anthony has a little more of the. This is the light. I think Anthony has the medium, and they also offer heavy and as long as 10 or 12 different flavors. So I have a link below in case you guys are interested, but they are both Anthony and I's sponsors. So thank you for sponsoring us in our athletic endeavors. But right, Anthony, sorry to cut you up.
That support you. We're here today. We're going to talk about competition prep, right? You put a year into it, you put 12 weeks into whatever. What do you do that final week? What separates the people that show up, the chumps from the champs? What separates that? We got a little bit of insight, I would say, just our high level experience, comps and performances. So we're just going to go over that today a little bit and just kind of give our own individual views on what we've done and what we think works best to become a champion.
Awesome. But before we get into that, I think a good question, a good thing to, in terms of people want to hear, in your opinion, what's a good deload prior to a contest?
A good deload, let's see. Generally speaking, it depends. It really depends on the athlete specific. I'm going to talk for myself specifically. I always like working out until the Wednesday before the comp. And by working out, that doesn't mean you're going all out effort. That means moving. That means doing something. Because some people, they go static for much too long and they just don't do much. And like any sport on earth, you have practice in between games. So I kind of view that week as like a practice, like a Thursday night game into a Sunday game. It happens sometimes. You still got to practice. You just don't go all out. And that, to me, that's what a deload is. My last heavy like event sim, however you do it, day is about 10 days out from the comp. And then from there till about the Tuesday, Wednesday before, it's more light bodybuilding, some movement on the bike, stuff like that.
Yeah, I wrote down here 9 days out. And then especially for more kind of established athletes getting into kind of the heavy competitions, I think if you're starting out, you can probably get away with 5 or 6 days in terms of a deload, especially if it's a little lighter and again, you're a little newer to the sport. But again, as you progress in the sport, you probably want to take longer and longer deloads, but we're talking more of that deload length is from your last heavy session. So of course, Anthony's talking about sessions that you're moving around, hitting the bike, maybe doing 50% of things, but nothing past 70, 80%.
Yeah, I'm not doing a comp sim 6 days out. That ship has sailed. You're not going to get better in a week. You will not. You will get stronger. None of that. None of that will happen. So that last week, don't worry about competition training.
Mm-hmm. So going into pre-competition strategy, I think the first thing to kind of set, and I think is important, is just kind of set the goal. And especially for newcomers, and this can be applied to almost every athlete. But before looking at the competition, before looking at the other competitors, I think the goal should be PRing on every event. You want to validate your training process leading into that competition. So you want to be able to have your best showing in that contest. The best, you want to be your best in training when no one's watching, when it doesn't matter. You want, as a great competitor, you want to show up when it matters. So our goal is to PR on that event and peak at the right time.
I think it boils down to, look, it's a sport, it's an individual sport. And the one thing that is totally out of your control is other people. So if you perform the best of your ability on each event, that's a win for the day. That's how it works. And sometimes it comes together where it's enough to beat others, and sometimes it's not. But there's nothing you can do.
But I like to say you usually have to beat yourself before you can beat other people.
Yep.
So Anthony, what are some kind of like mental preparations you think of leading into the contest a week out?
1 sec.
Yeah.
Woo. Okay. All right. Hold on. I was getting a little sleepy there. Had to do a little more zone. All right. Let's see. What was the question again?
So what are some mental preparations that Anthony does leading into a contest?
I mean, a big thing is self-talk. I was never big into visualizing. That's not the way my brain works. It's never really worked that way, but self-talk. I remember it's kind of gross, but about 2 or 3 weeks out from my first world title, I bought a gallon jug and I wrote world champion on it. Every time I took a drink of water for 3 weeks, I used the same damn thing. World champion right there. I didn't say world champion ? It was just world champion. That confidence right there is something that you have to work on. Rarely are you born with it. Usually there's life events, there's something that forms that confidence in you. And it's possible to talk yourself into shit. We see it all the time. Talk yourself into bungee jumping, into skydiving. If you can talk yourself into that, you can talk yourself into performing well. I promise you. I
think that self-talk also goes with if you're doubting yourself. If you doubt yourself prior to the event, you're going to doubt yourself in the competition. So
yeah, self-talk can be
both ways.
That's a good point. It can be negative self-talk. Positive self-talk is what you need.
What I like to at least start with kind of mental preparations is to think about, and I think it's a good practice to write down the keys to success for every event. What technique cues, what certain items do you need to execute on? If this could be even between events, but particularly for the event, what are the keys to success for you? So for pressing, it might be you really need to create separation from the implement into the overhead. For the yoke, you might be keeping your feet together more, embracing properly. For the deadlift, you might have to think about warming up properly. But what are the keys to success for you in order for you to compete and to PR on all those events? What do you need to do effectively going forward? And I think I write down maybe 4 or 5, depends, some events it can be a little longer, but I write down 4 or 5 different items per event to think about going forward and that I need to execute on in order to be successful.
I like day of meditation too. Again, I'm not good at visualizing, but I am pretty good at getting lost in something and kind of just calming and finding center peace. So like one thing I would do is, it sounds crazy, but before a big comp day, on competition day, I would set up a pillow against the wall. I will put on some music I like. It doesn't matter if it's metal, whatever you like, and it kind of is part of you. I put that on and I do handstands for 3-minute periods where I just sit there and think. And actually, I don't even think. I just kind of space out and come within myself. And it helps me regulate my heart rate, helps me regulate my adrenal glands, brings me back down. Because morning of, people get a lot of nerves. It's the best thing. Everyone does. And if you can manage those leading up to that morning, it's going to save those reserves for you at the end of the competition.
Sure does. Anthony, do you think there's any, and I think something that I've kind of focused on the last couple of years, but you think there's any relation between wanting to do something and needing to do something?
I think that is entirely dependent on the person who's thinking that. Some people can do what they want. Some people can only do what they need. You know what I mean? Like, it really depends on the individual and their psychology. I mean, how their brain works and how they accomplish it. Just as some people are auditory or visual learners, some people are like need or want accomplishers, if that makes sense.
So for me, especially for 2021, of course, I would like to win this contest. I would like to be America's strongest. I would like to be world's strongest. But when I turned it into a need, and sometimes I had to make up that need in terms of if I win, I can do X, Y, and Z. So when I turned that want into a need, so I need to win these contests, I felt like that was the difference for me. I needed to win. So I needed to execute.
Michael Jordan did that. He would create scenarios why he had to go out and dominate those games. Like, he disrespected me. I'm going to score 50 points on him. Like I said, it's a thing. I don't think my need was ever there to win. I think I wanted to win. But again, I operate different mentally than people. So it's just one of those things where you have to find what works for you.
So I think also important to talk about a week out. Do you think it's important, Anthony, to distractions and life stressors heading into a contest?
Yes, I do. I am of the thought that you need to limit new distractions and new stressors, and that's the key, because you can't worry about eliminating stressors that are going to be there. And honestly, your whole prep, your whole life, you dealt with stressors as you did it. Sometimes if you remove stuff too much, it fucks with you because you don't know how to function without that little bit of stress, without that little bit of stuff coming in. But it is important that you mitigate new stresses and stuff like that, because you don't want to create more on your plate ever.
Yeah. So I always kind of, especially going into competition, I try to be very, very scheduled, very prepared. So that means taking care of any chores or things around the house prior to actually getting close to competition. So getting things out of the way so I can focus more on the competitions rather than things that need to get done, or be able to schedule properly so those things will get done after the competition.
Well, right. You're preparing so you don't add stress to that week that's already going to be there.
Sure.
And that's what we're talking. That's the big thing. You don't want to add stress to it.
Sure is. But Anthony, let's change the page a little bit. So within the week, usually, especially since we're weight class athletes, we usually have to cut weight. We've talked in the past about water cuts and things along those lines, but I believe that the refeed and the rehydration is just as important as the cut. What kind of tips have you thought about, or have you done that have helped you in terms of your refeed and your rehydration?
So I am somewhat of a minority. I like to keep it simple when it comes to refeed. And I have practiced and preached this: carbs, salts, and sugars. That's what you really should be having on the refeed. It doesn't necessarily matter where they come from as much that day. It's not like you have to go to a white rice and fucking, white fish meals. For me, it was always a cheese pizza. That was the easiest way for me to get a shit ton of carbs and salts. That's just how it was. And that's every competition. I'd weigh in, I would rehydrate, because that's first. You don't eat much until you're rehydrated. For example, I used to do a gallon of water where I put half Gatorade, half water, and then some Jolly Ranchers in there to get more sugar. And you down that, then you can start eating. And then it's like I said, carbs, sugars, and salts is really the big things. That's what you're going to need comp day. Protein, it's very filling. It kind of sits there a little longer. You can have some, but you don't want to make that your main course that weigh-in day in the morning of.
So some things I like to talk about. So if it's a big water cut, a pretty big cut, let's say 10 or more pounds, I would say if IVs are accessible and affordable, I would say definitely take advantage of the IVs. But Anthony hit salt with almost every meal. So I even was putting salt on my hand like I'm taking a tequila shot. And
yeah, you can't overdo it with salt when it comes to after cut before you're not going to be able to overdo it.
Mm-hmm. So Anthony said sugar. I think getting electrolytes in, you don't have to go too crazy. Maybe like 1 or 2 Pedialyte packets will do it, especially if you've already got the IV, but you don't have to go too crazy with electrolytes. Personally, me, I take creatine regularly in my training, so I like to get creatine right after I weigh in. And I also take creatine again, probably later on the time, to start getting some of that water back into my muscles. I like the consistent eating. I like my stand effort in patent walks.
You don't change it up, right? You continue the same thing you do, though, like that you do your whole prep.
So I think that's a big key in terms of digestion. So especially you're forcing all this food because you've been starving yourself, let's say 2 or 3 weeks prior to time. So your body's not used to all that food. So you want to be able to digest it properly so you be ready for that next meal. But I also want to make a point, and I think I've run into this. I'm not sure if Anthony, if you've had any thoughts on this, but if you struggle with digestion, eating after a cut usually means that you have poor gut health. So I kind of experienced this a few years back, that I just wasn't digesting as fast as I should have. And I had people, I think it was Terrence that started helping me in terms of like suggesting good things in terms of like microbiomes and things that he's done. So the kombucha, the bacteria, the probiotics, to really have proper gut health, I think really helps to break down the food and break down those protein sources so they go in your muscles faster, so you be ready for that next meal. So that's
didn't South Park make an episode about biomes?
Say again? Sorry.
Didn't South Park do an episode of gut health where they were trying to steal Tom Brady's poop? Or is that?
Yeah. No. Was it? Yeah, that was South Park.
Because they all wanted the proper biome, so they started stealing other people's poop.
Yeah, what they call it? It was like the golden
I forget what it was called.
ticket. It was like the golden ticket.
They all wanted good gut health, so they stole other people's poo to give them the bacteria.
So it is, South Park doesn't lie, so it is a thing.
It is a little thing.
All right, Anthony. So at this point, we talk about goals, we talked about mentality, we made weight, we refed, and we're ready for competition. What are some things that we think about before the first event?
Oh my Lord. That one got me.
For the note, I told Anthony just for the beginning, but it's his choice to keep doing it throughout the
It's
podcast.
just sitting here in front of me. Woo, zone smelling salts. Get yours today. What was the question?
So at this point, we set our goals, set our mentality, made weight, we refed, we rehydrated, we're ready to compete. What are things that we're thinking about before the first event?
Think about how you're going to spend all that money you're going to make. I'm joking. That's a total joke. Don't take that seriously. Look, you just think about what got you there. Think about why you're there in the first place. That singular goal. Why are you there? What's the reason? You need to hone in on that reason, because that reason is going to drive you when you're not feeling so good. So you hang on to that reason. Everyone has a reason. It could be to you need to be a champion. You want to impress someone. You have to prove something. There's a million reasons. Hold on to that, and that's what's going to guide you through that day.
So I got a few things I wrote down. So I think a few things I want to share. So we're going back to the keys of success. Again, focusing on what's important for you, but one event at a time is huge. Don't be looking forward down event 3 or 4 if that's your best event. You want to focus on what's at hand at first, and you can only control what's ahead of you at that time. But I think proper warm-up is pretty key. And sometimes that usually means bringing some additional items to achieve that.
Oh, I didn't know we were going through all physical stuff now. Oh. I didn't know we were getting that in.
All right, I have a little spiel, and then I'll let you.
No. Your spiel might cover what I was going to say anyways.
All right. So anything that you want to add, you can add. So additional items given the contest. Also, usually in the contest, depending on if it's like a nationals, if it's local, if it's a very fast contest like Clash, you might only get like 2 or 3 reps on the implement before you go. So you got to consider that. So bringing in some extra bands, doing like a warm-up stick or calisthenics or some things that you want to consider. And then I got 2 notes. First note, remember your body has been deloaded for 6 or 9 days from heavy lifting. You haven't touched anything heavy in a while. So you got to consider that you really have to wake your body up properly. So a lot of times I think people, especially beginners, struggle that they're a little flat in that first event, and they slowly warm up because they use that first event as a warm-up where you want to be warmed up prior to that first event. So remember that your CNS is still waking up, getting used to and acclimated to that heavy weight. So you want to really make sure you're warmed up properly. And then even for me, and even kind of still in my recent competitions, for warm-ups, they usually feel pretty shitty during competition. But just like it does, sometimes it feels a little heavier, sometimes a little nervous, but I've done it enough times that when it's time to go, the strength will be there. The adrenaline will start flowing through your body, and then I can give it 110% once I'm out on the floor. And then the last point that I want to make, which is ultimately the biggest goal, is when we talk about really peaking yourself, when it's time to compete, you want your body as a healthy vessel where the adrenaline can flow through you. It can flow perfectly through you so you can perform at a maximal capacity. So but I just threw down a bunch of little points there, but that's what I believe is important heading into that first event.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important, you got to make sure that you fucking go through your equipment checks the night before. You got everything packed, and don't pack the morning of. I mean, we can get nitty gritty here, but that's not what you're here for. You're here for more smelling salts. I'm joking. No, then Nick, that was very good. That was very good broad stroke. That is very good. What you want to do. Prepare yourself, execute your plan, and keep your eyes on the prize.
I like it. So I think if I remember correctly, this was a question from Tyler Pruitt, one of your students, Anthony. He says, what do you do when you're competing and you have a bad event? How do you stay focused?
So I love this question because, for the people that have played sports their whole life, they have an easier time adapting to that, because if you ever played a sport, you know that one swing, one play, one shot doesn't make it, right? It's a sum of the whole, right? So all the performances all together dictate where you're placing. So yeah, you might miss a rep or 2, you might underperform an event. You got 5 more, you have 4 more, you have whatever left. If you dwell on failure, you will become a failure. Do not dwell on your failure. Dwell on the future, especially mid-comp. After the comp, all you want, go ahead and analyze your failures. That's how you get better. But comp-wise, you need to dwell on the future, not your failure.
I say always stay on that game plan. Don't change it up. And I like what you said before, which was remember why you're there. Remember why you decided to do the contest. A lot of times you have a bad event, you don't want to be there, but you got to remember your reason why.
Yep. There's always a why. Always a why.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing that any movie that involves torture tells me is there's always a why. There's always something, because there was tortured out of them at the end.
So hopefully you take all those notes and you have a successful contest. But those are most of the things I wrote down. I think we could even talk about, we can go back and forth, but other things to kind of consider. Sleep is always important. The few nights prior, sometimes you're not going to sleep very well the night when you're cutting weight. That's pretty standard.
Routine. It all goes back to routine. That's supreme. Even there's a few guys on back. Even if you imbibe during your prep, it's okay to have a few beers, a beer or two the day before. That's what your normal schedule. Don't fuck your body up, because it will fuck your body up if you do drink. Actually, and a lot of guys out there do, even though you shouldn't. We all know that, but it happens. You don't get drunk, but I'm saying you can have a beer and a glass of wine the night before. You don't have to totally change your routine, because that could come back to bite you.
I like it.
And that's just all my fellow alcoholics out there. I mean,
I think also too, I think sometimes social media plays a big role, and especially for contests, there's a lot of hype sometimes, especially the big shows. I think just staying off your phone the night before, especially when it's 9 or 10 o'clock, you're still getting a lot of that blue light. Turn off electronics.
That stimulation you get from it, because you're seeing what everyone else is doing, what's going on, and so who cares? It doesn't matter. Is it going to help you? Why are you there? Will it help the why? Then get off.
And then preferably I like to stretch the night before rather than just stretch the day before. Again, that kind of stretching out before and then doing other kind of warm-up drills prior. But again, we can always talk about warm-up drills for another time. But
nice little yoga routine in the morning doesn't hurt nobody either.
Say that, sorry, you cut out a little bit.
A nice little yoga routine in the morning doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, absolutely. But anything else you'd like to add the week before pre-competition strategy?
No, man, it's just this is all very serious and intense, but really end of the day, you have to have some sort of fun as well. And that's what, again, goes back to why are you there? But you have to have a little bit of fun. You can't be miserable going through that process alone and going through competition. You can't be miserable, or it'll reflect. So you have to have a little bit of fun, whether you're having fun beating other people, or you're having fun just being there. Again, it doesn't matter why you're having fun, but find that reason to have fun and do it.
I like it. We're gonna end it. We're gonna end it there. So this is our third discussion without a guest. So we've done deadlift in the past. We did moving events, and now we talk about pre-competition strategy. So if you want to see us talk on another topic, comment below or send us a message, and we can rant. We can chat about it again. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell.
Share.
Of course, share, and then on Spotify, tell all your friends, and Apple Podcast. And anything else, Anthony?
No, just like Nick says, a big thank you to everyone. We really appreciate it. That anybody wants to. I've always been very flattered anytime anybody wants to hear anything I have to say, believe it or not. So it's always flattering that we get to do this. We are allowed to do this for everyone. It's fantastic. Don't
forget about our programs on Strength Fleet. Anthony's also doing one-on-one coaching, so hit him up. It's in the link below. And until next time, guys, stay strong.